Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this session, Elevating Analytics, Integrating with Git and Automation. This session is predominantly about connecting Fabric, Power BI up to source control. Hopefully a session that will be interesting for you all. And Alrighty. I'm Hamish. I am coming to you all the way from Christchurch, New Zealand. I'm a DevOps and data consultant at a company that I run, Morfit Limited. And I've been in the industry a wee while. This session is basically how we can bring DevOps to the world of analytics. And bringing DevOps to databases and the masses, community and corporate people is a personal passion of mine. I run my own company, which helps people understand data and cloud, and of course DevOps. And basically at the core of who I am, I'm basically a technologist who understands business value. And if you follow me on X, Twitter, you'll often see me use the hashtag #MakeStuffGo. And in fact, I now run two companies, one called #MakeStuffGo, one called Morfit. And for me, everything we do, be it if we're working with a database, if we're working with an application, bringing DevOps methodologies and principles will hopefully help us make stuff go. Alrighty, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, I'm going to quickly talk about what is Git. A quick overview of analytics platforms. You know, this whole conference, this global conference, is dedicated to analytics platforms. So there's not too much reason for me to sort of go into a deep dive on things you'll see in other sessions. But where I come into this is why source control is vital with those analytics platforms. Integrations, so the integration of source control with those source control platforms. Majority of this session will actually be demo of both source control and getting Fabric talking to source control. We'll talk about branches and everyone's favorite topic, which is governance. It's interesting, you know, nowadays that, you know, compliance and regulatory standards are so important when we are dealing with data, or in fact anything, but predominantly data. And so having a level of understanding in terms of what governance is will be beneficial. But don't worry, I won't talk about it too much because I actually want this session to be nice and exciting. Alrighty, so what is Git? You'll see the term source control or version control. I sort of flip in between the two. I generally just call it source control. The underpinning engine of source control is Git. It's a distributed version control system that allows developers to track changes in their code over time. And it helps manage the evolution of our projects and provides tools that if we've made a mistake, we can actually revert back to previous versions of that code. It's open source. It is created by a person, Linus Torvalds, in 2005. If you use any form of Linux distribution, you'll know who Linus is because he basically created the very first Linux distribution and is kind of overseeing all of the development work around that operating system. Being open source, it's free, which makes it very, very popular choice for developers, engineers worldwide. And it's distributed in nature. So unlike centralized source control systems, Git's distributed architecture means every person has a full copy of the project repository. So I'll have one on my laptop, you might have one on your laptop, and we have a main source of truth, which is distributed from us in our remote repository, which, basically enhances the redundancy and collaboration associated with it. And, if we look at Git help, there's a whole range of help topics available to us, because if you've started using any form of source control system and really got down into the bare bones of what Git can do for us, you'll know that there is a big old learning curve. As I go on this session, there's probably only 5 commands that you really need to know using Git. So we'll go over those later. But if you ever get into trouble, and I do often, the help associated with Git is really, really, really good. So when we talk about source control, you may use, say, Azure DevOps, and you might be used to the source control within it. Back in the day, Azure DevOps or Visual Studio Team Services or Team Foundation Server, which shows that I'm showing my age, had its own form of version control, TFVC. So you could use that, but then Microsoft incorporated Git into it, so that people like myself, we could use Azure DevOps much like we would use any other source control that uses Git. And of course, GitHub. GitHub is prevalent. I see the industry moving towards using that more days than, say, Azure DevOps. So yeah, you might use one of these systems. In this session, we'll actually do a bit of command line stuff just to sort of show you the power behind Git. So Git enables us to track our changes. And so we have a commit history. And so Git records our changes that are occurring in our project through commits, right? So I make a change, I commit it. Well, sorry, I make a change, I'm tracking the file that code is in, and then I commit the changes. And so each commit that I do has a unique identifier, which means that we can track and see what changes were made. And so you can see here that I've made a number of changes here. We have an identifier over the right-hand side here and here. And so I can track what changes I've made and when. We also have branching and merging. And so branches enable us to work on new features or maybe bug fixes independently from our main code base, right? And so when we think that we've, our change is all good, we've obviously tested it, we can then merge our branch back into our main branch. But the cool thing is we still have that history of changes that we've been making, so that when it comes to looking at the difference in logs, we can track what changes we've done, but more importantly, other people can see that as well. And the tools that we have with Git enable us to compare changes between different versions of our files, and also view a detailed log of the project's history. And nowadays, now that the likes of Power BI, rather than having a binary file, which of course I as a human can't see the contents of, nowadays with things like PBIP files, we can actually treat those as text files and start incorporating some of the methodologies that we would use in source control, for the last 19 odd years. And of course, I talked about collaboration. So collaborative development. So what we have here on the right-hand side is we have work that has been done, and I am now getting people to look at what I'm doing whilst we're working on the same project simultaneously. We're using branches and merging whatever, but it means that I can work on my material, and when I'm happy, I can have this create a pull request that enables someone to review my code. And platforms like GitHub, GitLab, and Azure DevOps all provide mechanisms to do both the pull request and code review. And conflict resolution. One of the scariest things you can have when you're working with a source control system and you're collaborating with team members in it is when we make multiple changes in the same file in the same place. And so when we have this conflict, Git provides us tools to resolve the conflicts, ensuring that the final code integrates contributions from all the team members seamlessly. And one of the reasons why we'll use a pull request is such that that'll be our chance to resolve some of those conflicts, right? And yeah, there's a whole, excuse me, within the demo, we'll actually look at a very simple conflict that we'll have. Alrighty, so what's some common Git commands that you might use? So we will use git init, and during the demo, you'll actually see me do this. This is where we're initializing our Git repository. As we're writing our code, doing what we're really good at, we then will stage those files for our commit. So git add our file. And then once we're happy with all the changes that we've done, we'll now make a commit locally to our repo on our machine. And we'll commit those staged files and we'll put a meaningful message in there. And that message is not just for us, it's for others to see so that they can understand what we were doing at that time. Also, git log, very useful utility to look at what the commit history was or has been. And git branch, right? So we can use git branch to create a branch, and we'll be doing some of this during the demo. And of course, we can, once we've created our branch, we may need to swap around branches, right? So we may be in main doing some stuff. We then check out our branch, do some stuff, or whilst doing a pull request review, right? So reviewing other people's code, we may actually check out their branch just to see what they're doing. And of course, once we're happy with everything, we're then going to merge our branch into the current branch. So we might check out main branch, and then we will go git merge Hamish's branch, and then we'll bring in those changes into the main branch. Now, all of that I've been doing locally, but of course, the distributed nature of Git means that we will have a remote repository that we will actually push our local changes up to. And git push, which is what we're going to push those changes up to. Now, this looks daunting, right? There's a lot of commands here. Now, you can use certain applications to do some of these commands. You might use source tree, git kraken. There's a whole range of utilities, or Visual Studio Code, which I'm going to use in the demos. So you have a whole range of ways that you can. Hello? Okay. Don't know what happened there. But the main ones that you're going to want to look at is git add, git commit, git checkout, git merge, and git push. Literally 5 commands that you'll want to use. And back in the day, I'd been working with DBAs back in the mid 2010s. I had to think, basically 2016. And my advice to them was, look, these are the 5 commands that you'll need to use to interface with source control, because they didn't want to use, source tree. They didn't want to use another utility on their machine. They thought that Git was just about, C# development or whatever. So often they would just use command line, real easy, install Git on your Windows machine, Mac machine, Linux machine, whatever, and then just use these 5 commands. The rest, so initializing a Git repository or, adding the remote repository and everything, probably is going to be done by someone else. But yeah, once it's all set up, these are the commands that you'd ever need to do. So let's talk about Power BI, right? So business analytics service created by Microsoft. It provides interactive visualization and business intelligence capabilities. As I mentioned, I'm just going to be talking at a very high level on this because majority of the conference is actually dedicated to Power BI and Fabric, right? So Fabric, new advanced analytics platform, basically where it integrates data ingestion, transformation, storage analysis, and visualization. I like to think of Fabric as basically bringing an ecosystem of what used to be disparate technologies within Microsoft Azure platform, bringing those into a unified ecosystem so that we have sort of a one-stop shop to actually do all of the analytics that we want to. So that's my blurb on the two analytics platforms that we're going to be interfacing today. But why is it important that we should look at version control or source control in data analytics? Well, the really cool thing is that in the last couple of years, massive changes have happened within Power BI and of course Fabric. And that is that they can now interface natively with source control. Because as I mentioned before, Power BI files used to be a binary file. And you can't actually do a pull request on a binary file such that I can see the code because it's .exe, right? It's the equivalent of looking at a .exe, an executable. I can't see that. Whereas seeing the actual code, so a JSON file, text file, whatever, once Power BI came across, and then once Fabric started enabling us, allowing us to integrate with source control, meant that we could actually do some of the same paradigm as what I've been doing since 2010, 2011 with application development, then database development, and now analytics. And what that is that we can track changes within our data sources, queries, and reports. What do I mean by that? Well, data analytics projects frequently involve multiple data sources. They have, queries that are quite big and need a lot of input by a lot of people. And of course, report definitions. Well, previously, that was just clicking around. Well, that's not too collaborative. If I'm clicking something, setting up my data source in a UI, why can't share that? I can't codify it very easily. Because once we codify something, there's two things that happen. One, I can share my code with you. But more importantly, we can scale and have consistency. And that scale and consistency is such that the data source for my dev environment is the same as the data source for my UAT environment, which is the same definition as my production environment. The only difference is any variables that we might inject into those definitions. That is a massive game changer. And being able to store that in source control means that we have the commit history, right? So if I change something and make it bad, well, we can see my commit. We can see that, yep, I made this change and that's why it's not working, and we'll revert it back. And of course, it means that we can have collaborative workflows. And so, we've got data scientists, analysts, we've got database people. All of these people are working on our workflows, and without source control, we can have conflicts, duplication of effort. So I do something, you do something. Well, that's actually 2 times a human resource to actually do that change. And of course, inconsistency in outputs. And so by having smooth collaboration between us in terms of we can see the changes, they are in our source control system, means that we can work on different parts of the project simultaneously and merge our changes seamlessly. And of course, I touched on it before, right? We need to replicate both our data and our environment setup across different environments. So dev, UAT, staging, production, right? And so maintaining consistency across these environments can be quite challenging, especially if I'm setting something up and you're setting it up. Well, we might set it up differently. Whereas if we've got it in code and thus in source control, we can actually work on what the data source query and report should be defined as. And so the source control helps, or version control helps, ensure that the same versions of our definition, right, are used across all environments, which reduces discrepancies and errors. So yeah, the role of Git, it enables version tracking, right? So we can track changes across our data sources, our queries and reports. It facilitates collaboration. And more importantly, we see a history of changes, right? So we see a detailed history of all changes made to our project. So let's look at a Power BI file. So we may have a sales.pbip file that we have created. And what we're going to do is put this into a folder where we've already got Git initialized, right? So we're talking to source control. And then what we're going to do is go, right, I want to initially put my file into source control. So we're going to write a message and hit commit. And what I'm doing here, you'll notice I'm not actually using Power BI Desktop. I'm using Visual Studio Code, right? And this is where it opens up the whole landscape for us, in that I don't have, like, if I'm working on this file and I need to add in some variables, and I might not use Power BI Desktop, right? But I can read this file and I can take care of all the changes and everything that maybe need to be incorporated, variables, you name it. We then will commit, we'll then make a change. And you'll see here that we're making a change. We're taking the 6 here, right? So this change, we're adding another month, right? So for the 6-month average sales, we're adding an extra month. So this is our change here. So we're changing 6 to a 7. Pretty simple change. We'll then commit it, and you'll see here, the description, when it was added into the repository. Alrighty. I think now is a good time to do a bit of a demo. What I'm going to do, the demo is about the fundamentals of source control. And once we've done those fundamentals of source control, we're then going to actually go into Fabric and, connect it up to Azure DevOps and GitHub. Alrighty, so what we have here is command line. But don't worry, I will be flipping over to Visual Studio Code. So for now, what I'm going to do is initialize our folder. So what I've done here is I have made a directory. I've gone into the directory. So the directory is called merge conflict demo. And I've initialized it. So I could now use one of our best friends, which is git status, right? And that tells me there's no commits because I haven't actually done anything. Now, the cool thing is down here, sadly, we now have the joys of sharing on a big screen. What we have is this was empty before, and now we have a new directory in there. So what I'm going to do, and again, via command line, I am going to save a very simple file, right? So PBIP, right? So all it is is just a very, very simple definition that I have added. And so I've added that into my main branch. And so if we come into source control, this, I'm going to check this side. Right, so let's do git status on the command line. Have I saved it in the right place? I haven't. That's brilliant. I'm glad the machines know what they're doing because it appears that I don't. But that's okay. I will put the file. Right, let's save this. Save as. I saved it in the wrong place. Right, so we're going to save it into here. Cool. So you'll notice two things. One, we got a little letter next to it, a U, and two, over here, this said, hey, we've got some changes. Now, because I love command line, let's run this. Boom. I've got my file, example global conf for Fabric. And so what I can now do is add it. It's now added, but we need to commit it. Actually, what I'll do is I'll bring this back up to the top so it's nice and clear. We'll increase that a bit. Right, so let's commit it. Commit and M for message. This is first load of our file. Perfect. And so we now have that committed locally. So what I'm going to do now is, and if we come over here, you'll notice that this has recognized that all of our changes are done. We could publish branch, and what we could do there is actually publish that to our remote repo, but we'll do that soon. Because what I want to do is show you one of the scariest things that can ever happen in working with source control, and that's merge conflict, right? So I go to do something, I change something, you change something, and everything goes bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to, we've created an example conflict file here. This is our file before that we created, just to show you that basically we can treat PBIP files, Power BI files, just the same as any other text file. And so what we're going to do, if I look in here, you'll notice that we have a new file, example conflict, right? And there's the changes that I've just made. But because I like, and what we can do is actually using Visual Source Code, VS Code, is add in our files. So initial commit of file, right? And so what we're going to do is commit, and you'll see here that the initial commit of file has been done. If I did a git status here, that is because I have added in everything here. So we're all well and good. Now what we're going to do is create a branch. Now there's a couple of ways I could do it. We could do one here and call it branch 1. So we've created that branch, and down the bottom left here, you can see that I'm now on branch 1. On command line, and by the way, you don't have to flip in between command line and VS Code. I'm just doing that just to show you. If I go git branch, I'm now on branch 1. So what I'm going to do is actually, I'm going to do all this by command line because it's just way easier. We're going to add in another line. We're going to add it in and commit it. Boom, done, right? Notice that we have the change here because VS Code is dynamic. It's picking up the changes that we're doing, which is really cool. So we've committed that. So source control is all happy. We did a first load, we did an initial commit, and we added line 4 from branch 1. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a conflict. So let's check out main. So back on the main branch, what do you reckon we'll have in VS Code? Boom. Why do we not have line 4? Because that's in our other branch, right? So here, branch 1, which is here, has our changes. So if we checked out branch 1, we have line 4. If we check out main, no line 4. Alrighty. So what I want to do is show you how to create a branch from command line, because I can admit I like command line because it's really easy to scale. Me clicking around doesn't scale that well. I'm going to show you one of the best shortcuts ever. Get checkout -b, which means I create a branch called branch 2 and I check it out all in one go, which is brilliant. So what we're going to do now, we're actually going to put line 4 in. So what does that look like? We have line 4 from branch 2. Notice we have nothing about branch 1 because we haven't merged that into main. Now let's check out our main branch. Okay, so if I go get branch, yep, I'm on the main branch. Now we're going to merge branch 1 in. Cool. And if I look at our cool, so we have merged this into our main branch. Now what we want to do is merge in branch 2. Boom, we've got a conflict. So what does VS Code look like? Oh my goodness, there is a whole heap of stuff going on here, right? Now, I'm using a very simple text file here, but this could be our PBIB file, right? It doesn't matter. And that's the brilliance of bringing stuff like Power BI and Fabric into the source control ecosystem, means that we can start collaborating, but unfortunately, we can also have a few problems going on. So what we can do, and one of the really cool things about VS Code, is that we can actually either accept both changes, we can accept the current change, which would leave this. If we accepted incoming change, it would override it and just have that. But what I want to do, or we could accept both changes. What I want to do is actually do this. So we'll go line 4 from both branch 1 and branch 2. And we'll save it. And what that means is that we're looking at this. I think that's right. Let's just make sure. Oh. Actually, let's edit. Cool. So we have this to commit. And so what we can now do is actually do our commit. So I'll do that in a new one. There we go. Git status. Everything is happy. Alrighty. And when we come back here, everything is okay. I could have done all of that in VS Code, and you'll see here, right? Because we diverted out into branch 2, and then we merged branch 1 and 2 in, which I think is brilliant, right? And it feels scary with all those exclamation marks and everything, but yeah, overall, it's not too bad. Alrighty, what I want to do is not go there. we will go into Power BI. Okay, so this here is Fabric, right? So this is my home of Fabric. What I'm going to do is create a new workspace. So we'll create our new, okay. Whoops, global conf _ fabric 2024. Okay. So we have our new workspace here, right? And so we can do all range of things, right? We can do visualization of data, we can do data pipelines, you name it, we can do it. Now, what we can do, there's a couple of things. To be able to connect this up to GitHub, which is what we're going to do, which is really new, you have to have your admin come into Fabric, and way down the bottom, turn on one flag. Here we go. So in Git integration, we are going to turn enabled on. Now, word of warning, this takes about 30 minutes, right? So when your administrator clicks enabled to allow you to, connect up to GitHub, it does take about 30 minutes. But that's okay. I've already enabled it. So within my workspace, I can do Git integration and I can choose GitHub. I've already connected this up with personal token and everything. And I've told it to come into Fabric Conf. So let's connect it. Let's do a new branch. So at the moment, up here, this is my remote repository, right? In GitHub, and we have one branch, main branch, and I worked on it 7 hours ago. Let's create one called global conf 2024 Fabric global conf. Cool. And we'll create our branch from main. So create. Oh, this is really cool, right? So connect and sync. Connected. Brilliant. Now, if we hit refresh here, look at that. We've got a new branch up in our remote repository, which is brilliant. I haven't done any of that command line stuff, so some of you will be really, really happy. Let's do a quick item, right? So we'll do a data pipeline, test pipeline. Now, I do have to admit, all I'm going to do is just create this. I'm not actually going to do any of the brilliance that you would normally do. So if we come back to our here, look at that. We've got this here. We've got a 1 there. What does that mean? It means that we've got a new item, test pipeline. And over here, it's uncommitted. This is brilliant. This is a new test pipeline. I can't spell, but that's okay. And we'll grab it and we're going to commit it, which is pretty cool. We're committing this to source control. How cool is that? Now, that's all well and good, Hamish, I bet you're saying, but I don't believe you. Well, the really cool thing is, if I come into this branch, which I've been working on, boom, look at this. We've got test pipeline, and we've got JSON files. Admittedly, I haven't done anything, but who cares? I don't. The cool thing is we can now, look at this, we can compare and pull requests. So if I look at our main branch, of course, all it's got is just an example file that I was working on before. But if we compare and pull request this, I added in a pipeline definition. And so this is basically my initial commit. We're checking to see if we can merge it into main branch. We can. Let's merge it. Boom, done. Normally, someone else would review this code, right? So I'd get someone like Heidi Hastings to come along and, look at it. Boom. So what does that mean? Well, if I come to code and I'm on main branch, look at this. This is a new test pipeline. Oh, who worked on this? I did. I committed it 1 minute ago. Thank you, Heidi. I saw that you were on the call, so I thought, not just make this demo about me, but also about my mates, which is what DevOps is all about now with Fabric. So yeah, I've now made a change. I got it code reviewed, and I've merged it and pushed it up into Fabric, source control from this. Now, I know I showed you all that command line stuff. That was purely for my benefit because I like working command line. You don't need to do any command line stuff. I do. I mean, this repository was already set up. I actually did that via command line. And the really cool thing is that, the same methodologies that I would use in database development, application development, we can now do in Fabric. And the best news for you is you don't have to leave your ecosystem. If you're working in Fabric and Power BI all day, every day, you don't even have to use VS Code. You can just do it from here. That's a massive game changer. And it makes people like myself who've been working in the industry for so long and really wanting to bring things like deployment pipelines into code to deploy objects within Fabric and Power BI. Well, now we can. Alrighty. I just have to find, oh, yep, it's here. So that's a demo of GitHub. What if we look at Azure DevOps? So this one here, I have actually recorded for, because my good friend Heidi helped me set up a repository in Azure DevOps. And then what we're doing here is, again, our workspace within Fabric. We're connecting up to Data Center Day Christchurch, a massively brilliant event, I might add. We're connecting in sync. So again, whether or not you're using Azure DevOps or GitHub, it doesn't matter. We're going to use the same paradigm. So in this example, I think we're going to do data pipeline. Yep. So we're creating the pipeline. And again, right, this is a little bit of a repeat in terms of what I was doing before. But what it is about is that the paradigm, right? If you use Azure DevOps or use GitHub, it doesn't matter. And there's a question around, can notebooks be version controlled in the same way? The answer is yes, yes, yes. Additional settings to consider using GitHub Enterprise. Unfortunately, at this stage, it's GitHub in the cloud. So GitHub Enterprise is on premises. At this stage, it's GitHub in the cloud. So what we're doing here, we're just creating some stuff, which is brilliant. And again, thank you, Heidi, for recording this demo for me so that I could do it all day, every day. So we're making some changes, what have you. And again, look, source control, yep. Some unsupported stuff, don't worry about that. But we have some uncommitted changes as before. Again, if the backend is Azure DevOps or the backend source control is GitHub, who cares? We're just, for us as Fabric developers, we don't care. So empty repository, we now commit. Those changes are being committed. They've been committed. Let's go into source control. Refresh it. Boom. There's our changes. That is amazing. And I love this, right? I just love the fact that I can see JSON files for Power BI stuff. It warms my heart. Thanks, Heidi. Alrighty. So there used to be a limitation of no GitHub integration. It's been brought in just recently, which is brilliant. So there was only Azure DevOps. So as I mentioned, you can go into settings, enable this. It does say that when you're applying the changes within the admin portal, it'll take about 15 minutes. It was actually about 30, but that's okay. Other limitations, if the workspace that you are working on in Fabric and the Git repository are in two different geographical regions, then again, your admin, much like I had the admin turn on GitHub integration, for you, you'll need to enable cross-geo exports. Unfortunately, Azure DevOps on-prem and GitHub Enterprise, I need to change the slide to include GitHub now, they're not supported, right? And there's a couple of reasons for that. It's, when you're working in the cloud, reaching deep into, your on-premises infrastructure is actually a little bit hard. But who knows? It might get there one day. And again, sovereign clouds aren't supported, right? So your governments and all those kind of things. Alrighty. I really hope that the demos were exciting for you. I love, the fact that we started off with command line. Some of you probably were wondering, uh-oh, where's he going with this? But then we went into Fabric. We created some resources in Fabric and pushed them to source control. My opinion is that you should understand at least some of those 5 or 6 commands that I showed you on the slides before, because there will be times when things go wrong, and dropping down, into something like, if I go git log, you'll see here all of the changes that have been made, right? That's a really, really important thing to be able to do and see. Actually, I have deployment pipelines. Thank you, whoever just put it in to the chat to do deployment pipelines. I'd accidentally hidden the slide for some reason. Deployment pipelines, right? So being able to take our changes from the left-hand side in our dev environment, we've pushed them to test, and now deployment pipelines in Fabric, we can choose the changes that we are going to push into our production environment. And again, we can set up these deployments from code, right? That's in source control and pushing that into our deployments. So again, this is just a repeating graphic that I've got showing that, we can pick and choose what we're pushing to production, and we can compare the differences between our environments such that we can see, oh, the report that we have in dev and in test is not in production. We push it and do all that kind of stuff. Alrighty. I apologize. I am going to talk about governance. Okay. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the session, how does source control help us? How does source control help us in terms of governance, right? Because these days we have regulatory obligations, we have to deal with compliance, and there's a whole level of governance that we need to bring to our data, right? So one of the cool things that source control can help us with is one, ensuring consistency across our environments. So Git integration with, say, Microsoft Fabric ensures that all changes to data, all changes to configurations and code are tracked and versioned, which guarantees that the same version of these components are used across development, testing, production environments, which again maintains our consistency and reduces discrepancies within those environments. By using Git or source control, all changes to data schemas, transformation scripts, configurations are meticulously tracked, right? So we can track them using our Git log or logging within our utility, our website, GitHub, Azure DevOps, wherever. And what happens is by tracking the data lineage and changes, it allows teams, right? Not just me, but anyone, to easily trace the lineage of our data, right? So where it came from, where it's going, and understand the history of modifications to it and ensure compliance with data governance policies. And auditing and compliance, right? Sound like the two most boring things ever. However, with source control, we have, again, detailed logs and history of all changes, which is essential for auditing purposes. So if an auditor came to us and said, how did this change get made into production? Well, we have all of the history, right? We can show that. And it's not history that I've written, it's history that is captured by our source control system. And this helps in maintaining compliance with regulatory requirements by providing a clear and auditable trail of all data-related activities. Okay, I'll briefly touch on Microsoft Purview. And this could be like a whole session, right, on Microsoft Purview. And basically, Microsoft Purview is bringing a family of data governance, risk, and compliance solutions that will help us or your organization govern, protect, and manage the entire data estate that we're looking after. And Microsoft Purview, you know, provides integrated coverage and helps us address, you know, the situation where we have remote users connecting, we have fragmentation of data across our organization, and, you know, the whole blurring of, you know, who's a developer and what are they a developer in. And so, you know, combining Microsoft Purview into your Microsoft Fabric ecosystem will allow you to store, analyze, and govern your data. Right, what do we do today? Last 53 minutes. I introduced you to Git. I had a brief introduction to the analytics platforms because, again, this whole conference is dedicated to those. I hopefully have showed you the benefits of Git integration, right? I showed you how we can use command line. We can use things like VS Code, or we can just go, oh, I'm not using any of that. I'm going to use Fabric to actually interface with source control to commit my changes. You will at some stage need to drop out of the Fabric ecosystem if you are doing pull requests and, you know, those type of things. And if you do have conflicts, then I feel that by learning the fundamentals of source control, which we have covered in this session, and we've looked at one of the worst situations, which is we have a merge conflict, and how easy it is to collaborate, right? So when I made that change in that file, I would have been talking to the other developer. I'd be saying, well, I created line 4 from my branch, and you've created line 4 from your branch. What do we need to do here? And in our situation, it was we just merged our actual line 4 became line 4 from branch 1 and branch 2. You know, a very simple example, but one that holds stead when you are working with merge conflicts, because it might be part of that JSON file that's associated with a Power BI report, right? And so again, it allows us to still collaborate and still scale out, right? Working on different parts of our Fabric ecosystem simultaneously. And when there are issues, we've got a number of tools at our disposal. And of course, enhancing data governance. You know, we looked at the advantage of Git integration in terms of ensuring consistency across our environments, because we can have the same code, but just utilize variables that we will inject during our deployment pipelines and what have you. We can track data lineage, and we can, you know, fold a whole heap of what is basic source control, right? So auditing and logging into a situation where, you know, we can start having a conversation around data governance. I will look at the questions in the team's chat, but most of all, thank you so much for coming along to my session. And for those of you that have asked questions. Thank you so much for that. We've got a couple of minutes before the next session. But yeah, have an awesome rest of your day, night, morning, evening, whatever, at the event. Those are my details there.